Super. Okay. I'll apologize in advance if I'm speaking too fast, but we've got a huge amount to cover in 30 minutes or so. So we're going to blitz through this as fast as we can. In the words of Kubo, if you're going to blink, do it now. Now's the time to blink because you won't get another chance. So just to set the stage, just so you understand why we're talking about this, I mean, we probably don't need to tell anybody in this audience that cybersecurity is top of mind for all of us these days. I come from a security background. I used to be a CTO at a visual effects studio where security was, absolutely top of mind for me every single day. And what we can see is that what we've been doing just hasn't been working, right? The average cost of a ransomware attack is somewhere around $80,000, and that's including private individuals. Businesses are paying anything, upwards of, several $1 million. My mantra is always the same. You are always paying for security. You either choose to pay for it up front or you pay for it after the fact. Trust me, it's better to pay for it up front. Having several colleagues in the industry who have had to pay for it after the fact. So the approach towards security is broken, and it desperately needs to change. Our security model today looks like this, right? We have probably anywhere between 30 and 60 different point solutions in an enterprise, trying to address lots of individual areas. And what we tend to do is play a little bit of whack-a-mole. Every time a new problem comes up, we find a solution that fixes that problem. And we've never really taken the opportunity to take a step back and look at what it is that actually causes us problems in the first place. So I'm going to talk very briefly, first of all, about XDR. So I'm not going to talk about a product to begin with, but rather a concept. So XDR, for those of you not familiar with the term, stands for Extended Detection and Response. And it is effectively the connection between endpoint detection and response, EDR, which most of you are probably familiar with, and NDR, which is the network detection and response, but also really kind of a holistic change in the mindset. Depending on who you ask about XDR, some people will refer to it as a product. I prefer to think about it not so much as just a technology, but as a technology mindset around how we approach things. So the big difference between, EDR and NDR and XDR is understanding the entire picture, right? It's not just about blocking blocking threats, identifying vulnerabilities, spotting malicious traffic on the network. It's about seeing the whole picture and being able to map that into context. Context is the most valuable thing for all of us. It's about, collecting the right kind of data, being able to use that data to effectively identify threats in the environment and then take meaningful responses in a global hybrid environment. I'm not going to go through every point on the benefits. I've added this text so you can look at the slides after the event. But these are kind of the key areas. And for me, context is probably one of the most important things, because context allows us to do the prioritization. It allows us to key in automation. And when we think about XDR, a lot of people immediately go to, typical security products like, your firewall products and your IPS and your IDS and your endpoint protection products. It's a lot more than that, right? XDR is about looking at your entire environment, right? Don't just look at your IDS and IPS. Don't just look at your firewall to see what traffic we're blocking. Understand why that traffic even exists in the first place, right? The golden rule of firewalls is they are not there to block your traffic. Firewalls are there to identify the traffic that shouldn't even be created in the first place, right? If you're looking at your firewall every day, seeing 1 million hits on a given protocol from a given system, and you're happy with that result, something's wrong. Because what you should be asking yourself is, why are we creating this traffic in the first place? Why are we expending CPU cycles to block the traffic, right? Let's fix this in our CI/CD pipelines. Let's make sure that we don't deploy images with these services running. Let's make sure that our DevSecOps are well informed around what ports and protocols we do allow. So for us at VMware, XDR encompasses a lot more than just our security products, of which we have many, but it's all the way down to, our Tanzu platform for modern apps, even down to the level of vSphere, right? We do things like, verification on the images that we're deploying, verification on, every single element within vSphere itself, all the way down to, the storage layers, obviously. But fundamentally, from my side of the business, I work with the networking and security division. And what we're interested in is the NDR piece. And if we look at kind of, this idea of collaborative XDR modeling, what we're doing with XDR is taking lots of different data sources, lots of context points from lots of areas of the business, and feeding those into a single holistic view. And because VMware has an enormous install base and some of the best security products in the world, we're able to, through our our threat analysis unit, take all of these data points that we receive every day and build a security viewpoint of the world unlike any other vendor. So we made, significant investments a few years ago, acquiring companies like Carbon Black and Lastline. But even the organizations that you don't instantly think of as being security products, like, our advanced load balancing, for example, has a part to play in this security model and in the data that we're feeding back into the threat analysis unit. So I'm going to talk very briefly just around how we manage the network detection response side and how that fits into our XDR strategy. In short, what we're doing with our network products is nothing really smarter than what we've done in the past with our server virtualization and with our storage virtualization products. And that is that we're moving all of these logical functions that used to be physical entities or hardware dependent sitting around the data center, and we move those into logical functions running on standard x86 hardware. So we're taking things like our IDS and our IPS and our firewalls and our load balancers and the analytics around that, and we're mapping that into software and just running everything on standard x86 hardware. Because we're VMware, we don't have to just deploy an appliance, of course. We own the platform. So all of these functionalities that we're talking about are running in kernel. These are not virtual appliances that we deploy. We're not mimicking a physical appliance in a virtual environment. We're running all of these functions in kernel on the hypervisor themselves. So it doesn't matter whether you're running on-prem, whether you're running on a partner solution that's VMware based, or whether you're running on a cloud solution like VMC on AWS. In all those scenarios, it's exactly the same platform. It's the same kernel base. We also work with public cloud providers like AWS and Azure, so that we can provide some of the security controls that you deploy on-prem out into the clouds. So we give that true hybridity as well, whether you're deploying VMware platforms out on the cloud or whether you're deploying to the native cloud. What we started with, and what some of you hopefully are already familiar with, is our microsegmentation functionality. It's the main reason why most customers start adopting NSX from VMware or talking to VMware about security in general. And what we're doing with microsegmentation is breaking down the barrier, the boundary of the VLAN being the control point for a segment, right? So in the past, if we didn't send the traffic up to a physical gateway or to a gateway firewall appliance, we couldn't monitor the traffic. We couldn't control it. We couldn't do anything with it. And what we did with microsegmentation way back when was we started to actually put controls around individual workloads, whether they're containers or bare metal or VMs. We bring the level of control down to the workload itself. So it doesn't matter anymore whether the workloads are on the same network or on different networks. We're not dependent on the gateway firewalls anymore as our control point and our enforcement point. And we can use now intelligent contexts like application tags, like information-based tags, to group our workloads in a very different way. So we can, for example, stick a tag on all of our web servers that lets us know they're web servers, and then define firewall rules that are more intelligent, more natural language, more human, that allows our business to give us their requirements and for us to translate it directly into a security context. So we're not talking two different languages anymore, right? In the past, the CISO would say to her team, you know, web servers can't talk to web servers. And the response from the networking and security team would be, well, we can't do that because some of our web servers are on this VLAN and some of our web servers are on this VLAN, and we've got no way of controlling the traffic between them. Now we have the capability through microsegmentation to say, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter what network they're sitting on, what IP address, and it doesn't matter if they move from one environment to another, if they move out to public cloud, or if we move them from a, you know, if it's a microservice and we scale it up. As long as that tag exists in the YAML file when we deploy it, it's got the same properties, it follows the same rules. So we're able to do very smart things around tagging, around the way we group systems, and primarily we can start looking at securing applications from an application-centric model and not a network-centric model. Lots of funky functionality as well, of course. You know, we can do, you know, the full layer 7 stack. You know, we can look at app IDs. We can do identity firewalling based on, you know, things like the simple AD logins, or, you know, is this a ClearPass customer, for example? Then we can take the ClearPass identity. So 2 users logged into the same system will have different access rights. We don't care about the IPs. We don't care about the segments anymore. So how do we get to an application-centric model? Of course, we provide you with the tools that allow you to identify what the environment looks like today. So when we have that CISO challenge, we can identify all of our web servers. We can see the current traffic across them. We can build out a security policy model that says, okay, if I implement this model, what will it look like? What traffic will be blocked? What traffic will be permitted? And then we can publish that out to our distributed firewall. Again, we don't need the traffic to go through any physical appliances anywhere. Everything's done on host in kernel. Very simple. So if you're not already familiar with microsegmentation, that's our fault because we've been doing this for years. And it is the most common use case for VMware with NSX. But we've expanded on that massively over the years. So last year we added the capability to implement IDS and IPS in the same flow. So also through NSX, we now have full IDS and IPS capabilities. So again, it's in kernel, deployed out to your hosts. So most customers, when they're looking at IDS and IPS, the first question they ask themselves is, what's the cost? What's the impact to me when I switch this on my firewall? How much throughput am I going to lose? Can I switch it on for all of my workloads? Or will that mean that I need to go to the next level of hardware appliance? And you're sitting in this constant crystal ball problem where you have to look and see, if I was to do this in 6 months' time, is it going to impact my investment that I've just done in this hardware appliance for IDS and IPS? Well, we take that problem away because everything is done in your standard x86 hardware. If you expand your workloads, you're going to add x86, obviously, for the new workloads because you need more CPU and memory for the workload itself. And as you do that, you're getting more capacity for IDS and IPS as well. So you can stop having to look into the crystal ball. So turning on IDS and IPS is no longer a question of can we afford to do it in the hardware appliance? And it just becomes a, do we need it, right? Can we afford the network latency? That's really the only question. Is it something that we need for our application? And we can turn it on in a very, very granular way. So down to individual workloads, right? It doesn't have to be a segment. We don't have to pipe traffic anywhere else. There's no hairpinning of the traffic. And because it's done in kernel, it also means when the workload moves, the IDS and IPS capabilities move with the workload. So if I move a workload from site A to site B or out to a cloud, I don't need to worry about that workload now hairpinning its IDS and IPS back to my central data center. Everything's still done locally. So it's a highly efficient way to do IDS and IPS. And you can utilize the same tags and same groups that you're already using in microsegmentation. So this IDS and IPS functionality gives us now really a full service-defined firewall in NSX. So anybody using vCenter today, and I imagine that's the vast majority of people in these sessions, can adopt this today, right? You can literally turn this on in about 20 minutes. You don't need to make any changes to your network. You don't need to make any changes to your VLANs or your configuration on your VDSs. You can just deploy this and turn it on, try it out. So it's an incredibly easy on-ramp. again, going back to context, one of the other major differences with the way we do IDS and IPS is that we're context aware because we understand what OS is running. We can look at the app IDs and see what kind of traffic it is. If we only have, you know, MySQL traffic going between from a given workload, we don't need to look at 15,000 different signatures. We can drill down to just the relevant signatures for that workload, which gives us much more efficient scanning. Obviously, it goes a lot quicker, which means less latency, but also we get less false positives because we're not looking at nonsense when we look at this traffic. So it's a much more efficient way of doing it. We like to make things simple, so it's all embedded in the same GUI. You can see your alerts, you know, based on priority and criticality. You can see your references to your CVEs and your CVSSs, and you can understand, you know, what's being impacted. Where did this come from? What other hosts are being affected? So you can really prioritize your reaction to it. Again, all about context. So this is all very nice. Everything now we've talked about is, you know, all about detection and prevention. But there will be times when we have things going on in the environment that aren't as simple as a known vulnerability that a signature we can look at. And there will be traffic going over our network, which is permitted. That we do allow in our firewall rules and doesn't have a known signature with it. So the question is, how do we stop these kinds of lateral movement attacks? And how do we identify that something malicious is going on when it ticks every box that we permit in our environment? And that's where the advanced threat protection piece comes in. So, you know, IDS is great. You know, having those tailored signatures is a wonderful thing, but we need a lot more. We need to be able to identify if something which traverses the network is malicious. So we need network sandboxing. We have to be able to understand if a vulnerability, which is, you know, a potential zero-day attack, is trying to do something malicious on our environment. We need to know about it before the signature is released, obviously. We also want to understand through behavior what's going on in the environment. So we want to do some form of network threat analysis to look at kind of steady state, known good behaviors, and to look at the outliers, understand what's going on that is not standard. So these three components combined together give us what we refer to today as NDR, network detection and response. So the firewalling piece is nice, it's wonderful, but that's really about known good, right? That's about, yes, we can do zero trust based on what we know the application should be talking to. But again, once we've got those HTTP ports open, those SQL ports open, those Postgres ports open between entities, how do we identify malicious attacks going across the network using those open ports? So those of you already working in the security area should be familiar with the MITRE attack framework tactics. And this for us really, you know, is fundamental. If you're not already familiar with MITRE and you're even slightly interested in security, take 10 minutes and read up on it. It's a fantastic framework. Pretty much every serious security vendor is talking the MITRE language now because it allows us at any stage in our security planning, architecture, and remediation to talk the same language. So if we look at, you know, what we're interested in from a network detection and response perspective, these are kind of the key points that we need to touch in an NDR solution. You know, we're ticking all the boxes, obviously, with our product. But MITRE is used for a lot more than just a Gartner-like tick in the box where we say, yeah, we do everything that needs to be done. We also need to be able to communicate with the SOCs, with the CISOs, with the forensics teams around what we've detected in the environment and map that back into a MITRE-like conversation. So rather than just throwing, you know, 1 million alerts at you or showing you billions of events that we've tracked, what we're doing with our NDR is actually helping the SOC to boil that down into campaigns. So a campaign is a full attack on the environment. So most tools which do some form of NDR will take you down to the kind of the threat detection level. And as you can see here, we've got about 188 in this example threats. So going through every one of those threats and trying to understand what's been impacted, what's the cost to my business, Where do I need to start making mitigation? Do I need to engage with forensics already? That's a very time consuming and costly business. So our NDR tools take you to the next level and actually boil things down to a campaign. So a campaign is a full visualization of what's happening on your environment right now that shows you literally the moment of entry and every step in the environment, every single step that was taken from the moment of infiltration into exploitation into the environment, all the way through command and control, through credential access. Lateral movement is the thing we see most commonly. And then all the way down to the level of exfiltration. So we can actually see how far an attacker has got in the environment, and are they already at the point where they are taking data out of the environment. Reality is today, most attacks don't even get to the exfiltration stage because that's not what they're interested in. Most attacks are interested in encrypting your data for ransomware purposes. And they're already, typically lateral movement is the point where we need to start getting really worried. So what we're able to do is to visualize this for customers and show them, look, this is where we are. At the moment, we're past lateral movement on this particular campaign. We're all the way down to exfiltration. These are the hosts that are impacted. This is how, when, and why. Here's the time scale of every single step in the environment. So what this allows us to do is take that XDR approach and say, okay, we had firewall in place, we had IDS and IPS in place, we had endpoint security in place, and yet we are still experiencing zero-day threats using open ports that we need for our business. Now we can mitigate. Now we can put even tighter controls on a given application and a given service. Now we can get to the point where we can have a serious conversation with DevSecOps about whether they truly need access to our SQL database from their development environment, because that's where the lateral movement spread started. And we can start moving away from a network segment-based mindset to a micro-segmentation, application-based zero trust mindset. And like I said right at the beginning, this XDR mindset is much more than just a single product idea, right? Once you get into this kind of mindset and once you have these kinds of detection tools, it doesn't matter where your workloads are, and it doesn't even matter, to be honest, whether they're running on VMware platforms or not, right? The NDR tools work across multi-cloud. You could run all of these products without having a single other VMware product in the environment. So, the capabilities are there, but it requires a shift in your mentality. It requires you to move away from the old school mindset of, VLAN and firewall is how I protect my environment. And I put, anti-malware and antivirus on my endpoints to protect them, right? We've got to think bigger than that. So in the interest of time, because I know that I'm keeping you, I'm standing between you and the break. What is it we're offering from an NSX perspective? So today we can deploy Nsx Firewall, which gives you all the micro-segmentation functionality. Like I said, out to any vSphere environment without any changes to anything else, without any network implementation. It's just an OVA that we deploy. You're going to see this coming into vSphere, built into vCenter in the very near future. So you'll actually be able to deploy it yourself from vCenter. And then on top of that, exactly the same product, same functionality. You get all of the advanced threat protection stuff as well, just with a license key that's enabled. So you can do the full IDS IPS, you can do your malware detection and sandboxing, and you can do your full network detection and response with the network threat analysis. This is 100% agentless. So you can deploy this to any workload that's running on a VMware environment without any trouble at all. It takes about 25 minutes to do. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. If you want to try this, reach out to your local VMware team. We'll be more than happy to run through this with you. It's incredibly simple to get started. And we have even assessment tools that you can run for free, which will give you a full picture of your environment and show you what's talking to what and what kind of policies we could put in place. Finally, if you want to do it yourself, like a lot of people do, I certainly always do, then there is a wealth of videos out on YouTube on our channels that you can look at, and you can even log into the VMware hands-on labs and play around with this in our environments without needing to do it in your own environments. The short and sweet version there, I hope that gave you at least a view that we have significant products in the network security space, well, the full security suite. And I would just ask you to reach out to us for more information in a more relaxed, calm manner next time. Nsx.
So thank you, Angelo, for your presentation. I really enjoyed the ending of your presentation. And yeah, we have one question from Algirdas. When Nsx is distributed, ideas will be available in the CPP?
Yeah, it's a good question. Soon, basically, all of our products which are based, all of our kind of collaborative products, so VCF and VCPP, all of, anything which requires the integration of other products, has to go through very rigorous test cycles, of course. So if you're a VVD customer, and you've built it yourself, you can deploy NSX today with IDS and IPS. If you're a VCF customer, you can already do IDS and IPS. VCPP, the process is a bit longer because the scale of those environments is so large that it takes time for us to do the full range of testing. It will absolutely come. I don't have a fixed date, but I can look, I can have a chat with the VCPP team and see when that's happening. I do believe it's already in place in a couple of deployments, but it really shouldn't be long because we've been doing IDS and IPS for a while now.
Okay, thanks. One more question from my side, and so first of all, how do you think why ADS APS is trending the market now? Because a lot of companies are focusing. Now we're having a lot of new products, new solutions, how to detect threats, and one of these ADS APS. So, from your opinion, why it's trending at the moment?
Because people have been attacked. That's the answer, right? It's as simple as that. If we look at security budgets this year compared to 2 years ago, they're a lot higher. And that's what I showed right at the beginning. We're spending more money on security, but we're losing, we're not really gaining traction in the total amount of ransomware cost and total number of attacks. The reason why people are putting focus on it now is because there was an attack. There was a forensic examination done afterwards. Somebody gave a C-level person a report that said, this is how you got attacked. And they saw the line on the report that said, this was a known vulnerability. Right. They asked their teams, why wasn't it patched? And the team replied, because we're running a 7-year-old product, which doesn't support an older version. We can't patch it. We don't have time. We haven't got the resources. And the next question is always, what could we have done? And the quick answer is, if we'd had IDS and IPS, we would have virtual patching, and these vulnerabilities, which are known, could not have been exploited. Right. The rule number 1 is patch. Rule number 2 is if you can't patch, virtually patch, right? It's as simple as that. And if you have a good lab today and you fully patch it, if you deploy everything and fully patch it and try and run an IDS and IPS demo, it's really hard, right? Because unless you've got a 0-day exploit, there's nothing to exploit. But I guarantee you, if you put IDS and IPS into any customer environment, you will pick up things which are talking on known exploits. The number of people still running SMB1, without any protection in place is frightening. So yeah, that's the reason, to be honest, right? It's mostly political. It's business political. And this is what I said right at the beginning. You are always paying for security, and we need to have the conversation, us ourselves with our internal customers earlier, right? If you're the IT guy, you've got to have that conversation with the CISO or even the CFO, right? Because the CFO is the one who's going to sign off on the ransomware cost, right? And they will pay, because we've seen this time and time again in the, in the news. Large organizations will pay ransomware because they have no choice. The cost is restore from a backup that's 3 weeks old and lose 3 weeks worth of business and customer trust, or pay the $300,000 fine, and get our systems unlocked, right?
Yeah.
And when you explain that to the CFO and say it's $22,000 if we do it today, or $300,000 if we do it next week, right? CFOs aren't stupid, right? They read the news as well. So that's why there's traction now, because it's the awareness level has raised. And we're seeing that not just with IDS and IPS, right? But across the whole network detection response story. I can have a conversation now with anybody at C-level, and they have an awareness of network detection and response that they didn't have 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago, I would have to spend 5 minutes explaining to them how networks work. So that's good. In a way, it's good that we've had, the pipeline attack this year was good for us, right? Because it several $1 million spent, And even with them paying the ransom, you know, the people didn't get gas for days, right? So yeah, it's top of mind for sure.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for your presentation one more time. Thanks for joining us and telling us about the new VMware products and putting us a little bit more aware of VMware, but it's not just virtualization platform for sure.
Yeah,
it has
sure.
much more to show and much more to use. So thank you. And now I'll switch back to Lithuanian language a little bit.
Yep. I'll just say thank you to the audience as well for watching. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.